You trying to frighten people? No, it's a fact.
What do you expect then?
Identitarian means white.
No, that's...
What does it mean?
Extreme right populists did not have the earthquake they expected.
Would you mind letting me finish my sentences, please?
Sure. It's no secret that Europe's populist and nationalist parties are gearing up to try and make a splash at the coming European elections. But who's helping them?
We are nationalists, we are sovereignists, so we leave all our members with their own vision and principle in respect of all what is except these two.
You use comfortable phrases like it's a club meant for the exchange of ideas from nationalist populist movements across Europe, talking strategy.
Yeah.
But for Bannon, it's far more combative than that, isn't it? He called it gumming up the EU Parliament, in other words, blocking. Your purpose is essentially destructive, isn't it?
No, it's to rebuild.
You're not building anything, you're breaking things down.
We are reinforcing and rebuilding the preeminence of national states.
What did he say? He said, the beating heart of the globalist project is in Brussels. If I drive the stake through the vampire, the whole thing will start to dissipate. Well, pretty self-important claims, aren't they, these?
We analyze the situation in the sense that the EU system, like the UN, ultimately ends up as imperialism, a kind of imperialism.
I have confidence that the forces of democracy, of real democrats in Europe, will be stronger than these autocrats. And I hope they will, because indeed...
Given the rise of populism in Europe, doesn't look like it, does it?
Well, wait for the results of the 2019 elections and then we'll talk again.
I know you did better in Bavaria and you've done a little better in...
You'll see.
But they're very strong and they're very powerful.
And we will see whether they keep gaining strength, and I doubt it. We'll see.
It's the blacks you particularly dislike, isn't it?
No,
it's black people. You
don't.
said it. In 2013, if you're black, go back. And I want Estonia to be a white country. These were your words in 2013 on a television talk show here in Tallinn. And you were roundly condemned by other politicians, including the human rights group in Parliament.
But 80% of Estonians, there was a poll in Estonia, 80% of Estonians agreed with that statement. So take it as it is.
If 80% had agreed with the statement, you would have won the elections. You didn't win the elections. You came third.
We did very well, but I want to about this statement.
This was pure racism, wasn't it?
Can I please?
This was pure racism.
We will get to the racism issue.
What do you want then? With all this crackdown on migrants, you want to preserve your identity as such.
We want to preserve the Italian and European identity. We want to
white nationalist parties across Europe. You want to see more white nationalist parties.
No.
People pushing that idea, the identitarian concept.
It's not a matter of white nationalist parties. The League is not a white nationalist party.
Lorenzo Fontana said he saw an identitarian conception of politics awaking all across Europe. Identitarian means white.
No, that's your meeting. Identitarian was to protect the European identity, the European Christian roots, for example, the European culture, the Italian culture, but it's you that is giving to this identitarian project a racist development. That's not the meaning in any way that the League and our representatives are doing. So we want to protect the cultural roots, the Christian roots of Europe.
It's not hard to work out that if you go around saying Muslims equal threat over and over again, some people are going to react badly and some people are going to turn violent, aren't they?
We want to keep the German nation state and even the European Union, but we're talking about Germany here. We don't want to have that a Muslim country. We accept Muslims. There are lots of Muslims who are well integrated into our society, who take place, no problem, everything's fine. But what we do not want to accept is that Islam is starting to have an impact on our social life, on our public life, on our,
Frau von Stoll, you're not addressing really the point I wanted to make about this idea that Muslims are a threat to Germany.
Muslims are threat to Jews. This is, for example, something what we are getting from the Jewish community.
But the Jewish community isn't that keen on you either, let's face it. The situation in Venezuela could hardly be more complex. The United States, along with some 24 countries, is backing the new interim leader, Juan Guaido. Russia and China support the incumbent Nicolas Maduro. Now we have France, Spain, Germany and Britain who have recognized the new interim leader as president. How long can you go on with this? People are defecting from the administration. One of your colleagues, Venezuelan ambassador to Iraq, defected, accusing Maduro of violating the constitution.
That is his right.
An Air Force general in the Air Force. A military attaché in Washington. Your military attaché in Washington has gone. How long can he hold on, do you think?
It doesn't depend on that. I mean, a president doesn't hold on because of foreign countries ask them or like them or not.
He's impoverished the country and he's subjected it to massive repression.
Well, I think the aim here is to have the transition that is taking place continue to take place peacefully. We met with Juan Guaido's representative, the new ambassador to the United States, and Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela at the present time. We believe strongly that
according to you,
we believe strongly that the Venezuelan people should be commended for the way that they've handled this. They used the rule of law to remove Mr. Maduro.
He's still there. He's still there,
Yeah.
Senator.
Would you mind letting me finish my sentences, please?
Sure. Your international community has given Juan Guaido recognition. He certainly hasn't got it from inside the country.
No, he absolutely does have it from inside the country.
He's had people on the streets. That's not the same thing, is it?
What do you expect then?
People on the streets is power?
People on the streets is love. People on the streets is support. People on the streets is an expression
and it can come and go.
Hope.
And it can come and go.
For a brighter future.
And it can come and go.
Well,
the people that are supporting Maduro are the rogues gallery in the world, including the Iranians, the Russians, the North Koreans. Put a little frosting on the cake.
You don't think this is a you don't think this is a stalemated situation?
Oh, it's not now.
all the countries that are liberal democracies that have rule of law recognize our Constitution. And they recognize the legitimacy of Juan Guaido. That we are in a situation where a drug cartel has taken all the levers of power. By the way,
doesn't mean you're going to succeed any of that, does it? Doesn't mean you're going to succeed.
We will die trying. We have no option but to fight for our people. I will fight for my people until I draw my last breath.
How long do you think President Maduro can hold on now?
6 years, I hope.
Weeks of mass protest in Hong Kong show no sign of coming to an end. But how long will Beijing put up with it? You warned a few days ago that if things got worse, the Chinese army might consider taking to the streets. You said when there's trouble in Hong Kong, when things turn sour and there's violence in our street, our fear is that if the police are unable to control what is happening here, there's a remote risk the Chinese army would get involved. How remote is that risk? And if it's so remote, why did you mention it?
No, I hope it will never happen.
Why did you mention if it's a remote risk? You trying to frighten people?
No, it's a fact. Everybody understands that except you. You don't understand it. Hong Kong is a place where it is operating under the one country, two systems. It is
not very successfully, is it?
It's a huge political compromise. We are part of China. Under the basic law, China has a responsibility to ensure that Hong Kong is stable. Everybody who is doing business here wants to see Hong Kong to be stable. All right? So, yes, under the basic law, there is provision for the Beijing government to interfere. Nobody hoped that it would happen. I'm trying to say that we are trying our utmost to avoid this happening. So I'm not instilling fear into people's heart. I'm simply reflecting what is stated in the basic law and what is the political reality of the situation.
Of course, we criticize the Hong Kong government, especially the council, try to establish a law which Hong Kong residents disagree and doesn't trust. So that leads to this demonstration.
So you blame Carrie Lam for that, do you? The chief executive? You blame Carrie Lam, the chief executive. She's Beijing's appointee, isn't she?
She's the appointee. Even so-called elected by some Hong Kong representatives.
Why is she still there? Why hasn't she resigned?
Well, ask Hong Kong people. Ask Hong Kong people. It's their democracy. It's their system.
We in Hong Kong need to gain the trust and confidence of Beijing so that they can allow us the freedom of political reform. What about the other way around? What about Beijing's duty to earn the trust of people in Hong Kong?
Well, it runs both ways, isn't it?
Well, they haven't managed it very successfully, have they?
It runs both ways.
22 years, they haven't managed it successfully.
No, I think that's unfair. I mean, they've been doing their utmost to try.
Well, the opinion polls all show that people do not, the majority of people still do not identify as Chinese.
That's something
they identify as Hong
both the Beijing government and the SAR government will have to work on, isn't it? Everybody will have to work harder.
You think the people of Hong Kong should play nice to their masters in Beijing and they might throw them a few crumbs?
I didn't use those words. The words I use is that we should communicate with each other and we should instill confidence in each other. That's what I'm saying.
Why China is not using force to press down the demonstration? Why they compromise? Why? Because they seek opportunity to prove they can change.
This week, Conflict Zone is at the annual security conference in Munich amid plenty of recriminations and bad blood between Europe and Washington.
Are you trying to tell me that Europe has lived up to its commitments under NATO? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because believe me, there is no belief of that on anybody's part, that some of the European nations are not living up to their commitments. And indeed, look, I've done this for 10 years. I've come over here and tried to talk the NATO countries into living up to their agreements. They patted us on the head and said, oh, well, we're on track to try to do this or try to do that.
Let me put it bluntly, the problem is that many member states don't trust Donald Trump, do they, and his commitment to NATO. And why should they? I mean, he's done everything he could to undermine trust, that he's 100% behind it.
You know, I haven't seen that. Clearly, Donald Trump has shaken things up. There's no question about it. He's gotten all
It's a bit more than that, isn't it?
He's gotten all the allies to sit up and take notice because he was very concerned about the lack of fair burden sharing inside the alliance. And he wanted allies to pay more in his inimitable way. He got everybody to pay attention to the necessity of putting more money into their defense budgets.
Chancellor Angela Merkel said last year that there were good reasons to continue fighting for the transatlantic relationship. But she added, we can't count on it anymore.
Well, I'm sorry she feels like that. We don't feel like that.
Look at the House of Representatives. They had so little confidence in Trump's intentions toward NATO that last year they had to pass a law with bipartisan support stating that it's US policy to remain a member of NATO and prohibiting funds to be used to withdraw from the alliance. So little confidence do they have in their president's commitment to NATO.
Hooray! I saw that as a great expression in Washington of bipartisan support for NATO. And I saw it when we were there 10 days ago for the 70th anniversary. NATO is well supported across both sides of the aisle. That's a great thing.
Yes,
why are you criticizing that?
And not by the president.
There are 200 countries in the world, right?
Yeah.
The vast majority of them believed that Barack Obama's brand of leadership was far better than either George Bush's or Donald Trump's. You see the curve go like this under Obama and then like this under Trump. In Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa. And so we can talk about Israel, where President Obama had very sharp differences with a right-wing government led by Bibi Netanyahu, but I don't think that
it wasn't just the sharp differences. There were deep contradictions in your Middle East policy, weren't there?
Well,
you had core beliefs, but you voted against them yourself, didn't you?
To anchor on Israel, this was rooted largely in the Iran nuclear agreement. And if we had to do it over again, if the price of having a better relationship with Israel was not having an Iran nuclear agreement and potentially going to war with Iran, that was not a price that we were going to pay.
All the latest polls show that French, Germans, the British now regard the US as a greater danger to their interests than China, which you regard as your prime danger. How much blame do you think Washington should take for that?
Well, look, Sometimes events drive us in a direction that we shouldn't be driven. We don't feel the same way about our European friends. We're more like our...
You don't? There are a lot of recriminations these days, particularly over Iran.
In what regard?
To the Iran deal that Europe continues to abide by,
Sure.
and the one that you walked out of.
Yeah, well, we didn't walk out of it. The President of the United States at that time, Barack Obama, entered into that agreement over the objection of a lot of us. It did not have the things in it that it needed to have in it. It was very weak. It did indeed address one issue, but I viewed the Iran deal as a deal that tried to discipline a bad boy in the classroom that was doing 5 bad things. They addressed one of them. But
they addressed a big one, didn't they?
They addressed one of them.
A big one.
They addressed one of them.
Ben Rhodes, in the short time that we have left, let's look ahead to the next presidential election next year. What kind of Democratic Party do you think is going to be capable of beating Donald Trump with his massive following, his dominance of the airwaves, his dominance of social media, which proved so devastating in the last presidential election? What kind of Democratic Party is going to be able to counteract that?
The massive following is 40%. He is the most unpopular U.S. president to run for re-election in my lifetime.
But he sets the news agenda
every
day, doesn't he? He dominates the airwaves.
Then you guys have to take a look at why that is.
You have to live with the world as it is, don't you?
The Democratic Party just routed Donald Trump's Republican Party in
the
midterm
got 40
elections.
seats. It won 40 seats in the House.
Yeah, and won by the largest popular vote margin in the history of a midterm election, the largest Democratic victory in the House since Watergate.
Voters in the European Parliament elections have shaken up the continent's politics, turning away from the major power blocs that have dominated Brussels in recent years and boosting the smaller groupings, the Greens, the Liberals, and the far right. Apparently European voters weren't so keen on the status quo anymore. Do you accept a share of the blame for that?
For the first, voter participation has been very, very high historically. 51% more or less in medium in all of Europe.
But they don't like the status quo. They came out to say that.
But this gives democratic legitimacy to European institutions, shows that people start to understand how relevant the European Union is and that it really affects their daily life and their future. They want more accountability, they want more transparency. I think they will ask much more participation for whoever is going to run Europe in the future.
That's a nice way of spinning it, isn't it? The top jobs were carved up in a kind of backroom stitch-up that people were told wasn't going to happen again. And it did, despite all these promises. Why? You let the voters down.
No. I mean, first of all, why do you speak about the backroom deal? I mean, it was so transparent, Osaka and all the process and the names in the game. I think it was very, very transparent.
Not according to the outgoing Commission President. He called it not very transparent. Quite an indictment from Jean-Claude Juncker, wasn't it?
It's true, but I don't have to agree with him on this point. I think it's not the best process, but it's the process that is described in the treaties.
People are losing faith, though, in the EU. Here's the paradox, isn't it? Highest level of support for membership since 1983. But more than half the people of Europe think the EU is likely to collapse within a generation.
Well, for the first Brexit...
That's also the legacy of the last 5 years, isn't it?
The chaos and implosion that unfortunately we have seen in the UK has been a vaccination rather than infection for the rest of Europe. We have seen...
So you should be stronger as a result of that.
We have seen, if I can finish my sentence, the Eurobarometer, country after country, European Union popularity has increased even in Hungary, with a few exceptions like Czech Republic, and we have seen one after the other, the extreme right political parties dropping the agenda of leaving the European Union and leaving the euro.
But why all the doubts about whether the EU can actually stay together? I mean, Spain's foreign minister, Josep Borrell, was asked in an interview if it was so fragile, if Europe was so fragile it could break up. His comment was, honestly, yes. Honestly, yes.
Yes, so Europe has always been growing stark out of big crises. We were born out of the ashes of World War II. And the reality is that it's one of the best places in the world to live. We never had it so good in Europe.
But voters are they are very disappointed.
Very disappointed.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be about them. You were seeing the turnout go down in every single election since the European elections started, and this was the big push to rope more people in because they were going to be listened to, and they weren't.
Yes, I mean
this is a big failure, whichever way you like to spin it, but it is a big failure.
But Tim, I mean the
for
participation,
basic democracy, representative democracy. That's what I'm talking about.
But the participation in the European elections has been raised also because of the better understanding of the citizens about the need of the Union.
Because the expectation they might actually be listened to. That's why they voted. They were told it was going to be different. Let's just go back to Europe and the new political landscape after the European elections. The AfD is joining Matteo Salvini's Identity and Democracy group, which is going to be the 5th largest group in the European Parliament, not the 3rd largest, which is what you were aiming for. Your party promises to be a thorn in the flesh of the establishment. What does that mean? You're just going to block and disrupt and create trouble?
No, what we are trying to get out is the message that we are in favor of the European Union as it has been set up by the founding fathers of the European Union. We're against the ever closer union. We want to keep the sovereignty of the nation states. What we think is that democracy only functions within a nation state. And we want to work together where it is necessary to do so, but we do not want to move towards an ever closer union.
Extreme right populists did not have the earthquake they expected. They have been actually having an earthquake of scandals. And the liberal conservative forces are stronger than previously. The Greens advanced, the Socialists collapsed, the extreme left lost almost 50 seats.
5 years ago, there was no far right at all, was there? So you held the door open for them during the last 5 years.
I think this is not the time for blame gaming. This is the time to see...
It's the time for the truth, isn't it? Time to look at what happened, the achievements of the last 5 years. Brexit. With each passing day, it's come to mean a more disunited kingdom and a more damaged, weaker government.
Theresa May was a Remainer. Her heart was never in leaving. She always saw it as a kind of damage limitation exercise.
Well, you say that. She said she was quite concerned to deliver Brexit. She promised on innumerable occasions to deliver Brexit.
Well, she failed, and in the end, I'm afraid...
Well, you helped her fail, didn't you?
The party lost confidence in her, and so did the House of Commons.
But there was a lot of ignorance on the Leave side, wasn't there? I mean, even among some of the most visible campaigners like Boris Johnson, for instance, when he was questioned on TV last September, turned out he didn't know that Switzerland was in the single market and refused to accept it when he was told that was the case.
Well, I'm not responsible for what Boris has said. We voted to leave.
But you're leading Brexit and you hear this sort of nonsense come out. Why don't you say it? This is wrong.
The British people deserve the referendum result to be implemented.
They deserve the truth being told them by some of your leading campaigners.
And they deserve the truth, and they don't deserve a whole lot of MPs who say they accept the referendum result and are now campaigning against it.
You happy that Boris Johnson has been ordered to appear in court over claims that he lied during the referendum campaign, over this £350 million a week to the EU?
Well, the person who's done that is an absolute ardent Remainer. And actually, if
does that matter?
Well, yes, of course it does.
Why? It doesn't have a bearing on the merit of the case,
well, it
as
does.
the court said.
Well, it does, because clearly he's doing it from a particular perspective. If the aim is to damage Boris, it will have precisely the opposite effect.
You know, I do advise our European partners not to overplay their hand.
What your negotiators seem to obsess about is that Britain must appear to lose from this.
No, absolutely not.
The EU has made it clear that leaving the EU is a mistake, and that should become a self-fulfilling prophecy now.
No.
Britain has to lose.
No,
whoever else loses, Britain has to lose.
I mean, you play the ERG part, but that again is a lunacy. I mean, no, we just say that membership of the European Union has benefits. And of course, if you're not member, you don't enjoy those benefits. It's not punishment, it's just statement of fact.
The EU is the largest trading group in the world. They hold all the cards. It's their club that you're leaving. They will decide what rules apply. Should you wish to take advantage of some of the privileges on offer with that club?
Yeah, and I think what I thought we had in our manifesto 18 months or so ago was that we wanted to agree a comprehensive trading arrangement with them. They've agreed one of those with Canada, they've agreed one of those with Japan. I'd be quite happy just to replicate the terms of that.
You've been saying that no deal is increasingly attractive But that's not what you and your Vote Leave colleagues promised the country, was it? I mean, time and again, they promised great deals with the EU and everyone else and said they just fall into Britain's lap, didn't they? It turned out to be nonsense, didn't it?
Well, I have to confess that I think it's in the European Union's interests to strike a sensible free trade deal with the United Kingdom. And whether we make that agreement before we leave, which looks rather unlikely now, or after we leave, I believe that that's what will happen. But in the end...
My point is there were a lot of broken promises, weren't there?
Well, the Vote Leave campaign didn't make promises. We were campaigning.
It's your presumption that there will be maybe a crash out without the deal, but it's not said. The deal is on the table, and the UK and the next Prime Minister can still subscribe to it or make propositions how we can improve it.